All right, guys. So today, it is at the time of this recording, we're seeing mortgage rates go up. We're seeing the price of real estate go down, right? A lot of people that are in the investing space, they're saying there's opportunity out there. And I'm one of them. I think there is a lot of opportunity. I'll give you an example. We just picked up a short-term rental. This is going to be a vacation rental that we brought in a couple of partners on, and we bought in Surf City, North Carolina, an area that's seeing 80% population growth over the last couple of years. So, but we were able to buy that almost $200,000 out under what it's actually valued at, and that's because when times like this happen, when we go into these, everybody's going to say it's a recession. People tighten up their spending, and people start to panic and sell for lower than what it's actually valued at, and people start to buy less, right? Well, every time this kind of thing happens, there are a few, there's a small amount of people out there that are savvy about it and understand that this is a time that you can make a lot of money. And this is the time to invest. Not, this is, as some people are saying, everything's on sale. That's just a way of looking at it. That's a mindset, right? Everything's going on sale. And if you were to buy it up now, imagine, for example, if you started buying real estate right after the crash in 2008, right? How much has real estate appreciated? Just appreciated, never mind forcing the appreciation through adding value or increasing rents or decreasing expenses. Never mind that. Just how much has real estate appreciated since 2008, you know? And I get that every time people are like, oh, I can't believe you're investing in real estate in a time when that market's getting ready to crash. And I would say to you, the best time to invest was 20, 30, 50 years ago. The second best time is right now. Get out there and buy something that's going to appreciate, that pays for itself because people are using it, right? And that could be a business, a service, that could be, real estate. I love real estate because we know it's a human necessity. People need a place to stay. And the wealthy continue to take vacations during a downturn. And that's why we like that luxury Airbnb model. But the same goes for, workforce housing. If you're providing workforce housing to working class Americans via like apartment complexes or mobile home parks or just, base rentals in a good area with a strong job market, the value of those properties is going to go up. Even if they go down, it doesn't matter because you don't care about the value, right? The value could go up and down, but it's cash flowing every day because somebody is using it. And that's the most important thing, because if it's cash flowing, you can weather the downturn, and then you buy when it's low, like right now, you buy when it's low and you sell when it's high. And that's our whole model. And, for everybody from Warren Buffett to Grant Cardone to, everybody that ever invested in anything, that's what they say. That's what you want to do. You want to buy low and sell high. The nice thing about real estate is you can buy low and then it pays for itself until it gets high. You're not holding out and paying for it until it gets high, unless you buy underwater, right? Unless you buy improperly. But again, the best time to invest was 20, 50 years ago. The second best time is right now. So if you guys aren't looking out there for opportunity, understand opportunity is made. It's not found, it's made. And there's a lot of opportunity out there, but you have to stop listening to all the naysayers. And I'm going to say it, the ignorant people that don't understand investing, that don't understand real estate, that don't understand finances, right? Get prepared, get educated, get out there and start investing, because we're coming up on one of the biggest transfers, wealth transfers in the history of finance. And just like in 2008, I mean, how many millionaires were made after 2008 because they invested properly? And then the same thing happened in the 30s. The same thing happens. If you look at every crash historically, a lot of wealth was transferred during those recessions, during those crashes. So, get educated, start investing, learn an area that you can invest in, and go all in. We've been able to build quite a good portfolio. And, if you ever have questions about how to invest in real estate, how you can get your first vacation rental, or how you can invest passively in multifamily real estate, check out our website. We have a ton of blogs there, a lot of free information. And then, of course, some of our guests that come on the podcast to talk about this stuff as well. But anyway, I don't want to hold it up much longer. I hope you guys enjoy the show today. This one was a great one. I talked to a longtime friend, mentor, real estate investor like myself, one of the guys that I partnered with on our very first big deals, we did a deal with him, 82 unit deal. That was our first large syndication. And since then, we've gone on to do up to 384 units. So it was a pleasure talking to him. And the cool thing is, my brother says this all the time: how you do one thing is how you do everything. And in this podcast, we actually don't talk about real estate. He's successful in real estate, sure, but his marriage, his family comes first. And that's what we talk about today: integrating a good, balanced life, family life with his wife and kids before, business, or in conjunction with his business. So I hope you guys enjoy the show. This was a lot of fun to talk to him about him. I really enjoy working with him and talking with him. He's a great person. So please leave a rating and review, and let's get to the show. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Art of Winning with your host, Ashton. Today, I got a very special guest, partner, friend, mentor even, believe it or not, and Stephen Libman from Integrity Holdings Group. This guy is an animal. He's a beast. He's setting up some amazing things in the real estate investing world. And it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know him and work with him. So Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, man, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to hang out. And, oh man, I was trying to open up this video that played "All I Do Is Win, Win, Win," but stupid YouTube.
Some hype music.
They gave me some ads instead. But yeah, dude, no, I appreciate you having me on, and I love what you're doing with the podcast. And just, I think that there's a lot of value to extrapolate from conversations like this about where people are winning in different pieces of their life. So yeah, I appreciate you guys and all you've been able to do with us. We met about, 3 years ago, and about 1,000 units later, right? And about $100 million worth of property later.
2020, COVID was just starting, I think. And we met with you several times over like 6 months. And then we partnered on that first deal that actually didn't go through, but it was out in Ohio. If you remember that, renegotiated. Renegotiated several times. But I mean, it was a huge learning process for us. And we'd done our first syndication that year. And then we did 3 more.
So we flew out to a property, we saw it, we did the due diligence, we paid a bunch of money, and the deal didn't go through. This is clearly not Facebook, because everything is perfect in real estate all the time, isn't it?
Yeah. Isn't that the truth, man? Yeah. No, but it was great. I mean, that was a great learning experience. I think we ended up doing an 84 unit in Ohio. So it worked out really well. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, for our listeners, let's get a little background on you. So you've been an entrepreneur now for what, 15 years?
Yeah, about 15 years. I came out of college. I graduated Boston University in 2004. Everybody's like, oh, you must have a degree in finance or real estate. It's not true. I have a degree in sociology. Love the study of people. Always fascinated me. So I ended up getting a liberal arts education, which, it taught me some skills. And then after college, I went into the corporate world, worked in Manhattan, suit and tie, briefcase, the whole thing for about 18 months, and realized I can't do this for the rest of my life. And went out and became a realtor and started working with a family real estate firm. And this was back in like 2007, 8 during the downturn. So we were selling a lot of bank-owned properties and selling a lot of those to investors. And one of our investors, I made him, I don't know, maybe $700,000-$800,000 in net profits by the deals I found him that year. And we were at the closing table, and he looked over at me. He said, "Hey, somebody stole the pool ladder out of the pool." I said, "Well, that sucks." He's like, "It's going to cost $280. And I said, "Well, okay, it's a bank-owned property, right? What are we going to do? We're going to negotiate with the bank. Like, I'm going to call Wells Fargo and tell them that the pool ladder's missing."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, you have to take it out of your commission or I'm not closing." And I did. I took it out of the commission, the $6,000 commission that I was making, that I split 50-50 with my broker.
Right.
And I paid for it, and I quit that day. I called him a couple years ago, actually, and thanked him for that violent shove out of the real estate world and into my own firm, where we started wholesaling and flipping properties. We wholesaled and flipped about 1,000 properties. And then in the last 3-4 years, we've converted completely to commercial buildings, apartment complexes, self-storage facilities. And this week, actually, we're launching a $100 million equity fund. So it's been quite a career in the last, 11 years.
Did you
And
say
it
100
has-
million?
Yeah, $100 million fund.
That's brilliant.
So
Yeah.
that should relate to about $500 million in acquisitions, depending on what leverage we get across the portfolio. But
Right.
yeah, we got tired of chasing money when we had a deal, right? And you guys know it very well because you were side by side, arm in arm with us doing that. And it's like, here's a deal, go raise 10 million bucks in 60 days. It's always a fire drill. And like, I'm trying to get my beard to stop turning white. So I decided maybe we can maybe we could start a fund and put some cash in the bank and then go chase deals. So anyway, that's the real estate career. On the other side of it, the important stuff is I'm a husband and father of 3. So been an entrepreneur with a very supportive wife who loves process and loves stability.
Mhm.
And I don't understand how she has followed me through this path, because it has not been that. It has not been stable for the first at least 6 or 7 years. And I have 3 beautiful kids, an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And we love the Lord. We love each other. We're focused on how to give back abundantly through our business. And that's the long and the short.
Man, I love that, man. I love that story. And I actually got I got a little emotional, or feeling emotion. I don't say I get emotional, but I definitely felt it when you started talking.
I had some
about
feels.
That. Yeah, I had some feels, and I have 2 feelings, right? Good and other stuff that I'm not sure what it is. And for those that know me, you probably understand that. But anyway, no, I think that that is a tough road, right? Because I love that you're with somebody that wants stability, and entrepreneurial business is not stable because you don't know, right? You're building it. You're always building more. You're setting that goal that you'll never achieve, because every time you get to a certain point, you keep going further. It's not like when you work for somebody, when you're just you have a check coming every month. All I got to do is hit this, and this. I got to show up 5 days a week,
right.
9 to
Hit
5
these metrics,
and I'm good. This entrepreneurial people that are entrepreneurs, they are out there hacking away. They're chasing things bigger. They want that freedom. And I think that's admirable. And then the women that stick by them, or the men, whichever the case, I think, because it's usually the opposite. Like my wife's the same way. I should read you this text she just sent me. It's hilarious. But because that's what it is. So she's leaving to go set up our latest investment, our Airbnb investment property. So she's going to go down there and finish the setup and manage the contractors and everything. And I'm going to have the girls, my daughters, I have 2 daughters, all by ourselves. Right. And at the same time, like my grandmother just died, and we're going to go to the funeral, and she's sending me all these directions. I was like, honey, they're my kids too. I'm not going to do anything crazy. She's like, I know you, and you're
I'm not going to break them.
Yeah.
Mostly.
So, but that's kind of how it is, right? Like you are, I know you're the visionary, and then, that's how you do it. You see these big problems and you go after it, and you don't know all the details. And that scares people sometimes. Even if your wife's anything like mine, she's terrified of it half the time.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, the biggest blessing was really, I remember when it got tough. I remember when we had to go to her parents and borrow a mortgage payment because I had money on the street, and I owned some houses that we were flipping, and we owned our own house, and we had a baby, and I had to go hat in hand to her parents and say, I'm not going to be able to make the mortgage payment this month.
Jeez.
Right. But I have some closings coming in 3 or 4 weeks. And of course the entrepreneur in me, right? I was like, can I borrow it? I'll pay you 10% on your money.
Yeah.
Right. I'll get it back to you in 4 weeks. They didn't charge me interest, by the way, but they did lend me the cash to pay the mortgage. And I remember I did that, and I looked at my wife and I said, I can go get a job. Like I know based on my skill set that I can go get us a $150,000, $175,000 a year sales job, and we will have a pretty comfortable life. And I will go do that for us.
Yeah.
And I was terrified that she'd say yes. but I was willing to lay it on the line. Right. And thank God she looked at me and without missing a beat, she goes, "You would be miserable." She goes, "And I would much rather deal with being broke than dealing with an unhappy husband."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. Right. And that spoke volumes to me. And I think, frankly, it made me hustle harder. Like it made me like, I didn't have any doubt that eventually we would win. I just didn't know when.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that really made me recognize like she believes in me sometimes when I don't believe in myself, and she's going to push me to do what I envision can be possible. And,
Yeah.
That level of support, and you're right. It is typically opposites that attract. Right. So like you and I, we're all gas. Like we'll fly into a wall if nobody pumps the brakes for us. My wife is all brake, right? She
Yeah.
wouldn't get off the starting line without me. So, as an entrepreneur, it's scary to know like, how is this affecting the other person? Because sometimes I'm terrified and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going for it. So I can only imagine what she feels like in tow.
Yeah. Oh man. That's kind of what I wanted to focus on today, because I know you guys have such a great relationship. You've been doing this a lot longer than I have. Although, I mean, I was in the military, so part of it, I don't know, maybe it goes back and forth, but yeah, I mean, you guys have been very successful. $100 million fund. You've built that up from, asking to borrow money from your in-laws, which, that takes some balls, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, that's almost like, I don't know. A lot of people I think would turn and not do that. They would go get a job. You know what I mean? So, but you had faith in yourself at some level, which I think is awesome. And she had faith in you, and that's even better. So I kind of want to explore that with you guys, how you guys have developed such a strong relationship, maybe some tips and tricks, how people that are going through this stuff can have a better relationship as they grow in their business and their family life. And, cause that's what it's all about. It's not all about money, although that does make things easier, but like you want to have a successful relationship when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think one of the scariest parts of being an entrepreneur is that you can figure out how to make it work and you can get to a place of financial or business success, right? But if you leave your family as the wake of carnage in its path, then it's all not worth it.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, right, that have been divorced multiple times or estranged from the kids, and they're sitting on a pile of cash and nobody to enjoy it with. So
yeah.
I think that's kind of where it all starts, right? I mean, for my wife and I, it started the day that we got married, maybe a couple months before that in pre-marriage counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Grace's dad is a pastor, and he was a great mentor to me. He was a very logical thinker and very practical in terms of like what steps to take. And when he passed away last year, they were married 53 years. Right, which is such a rarity in today's day and age.
Yeah,
I come from a family where 7 divorces between my two parents.
Wow.
My brother was married and divorced 3 times and engaged another time.
Yeah.
So I have very different perspectives on marriage, right? And I think that a lot of the things that push you to be great and to push you to win are often based on traumas that you've gone through in your own life, or things that you've seen that you're like, I don't want that, so I'm going to let the pendulum swing the other way. Right. And you have to be careful as to how far the extreme goes. But, so we'll go back to pre-marriage counseling, right? It's like, okay, so why do you want to be married?
Right.
Right. Let's do some easy tasks, right? That I never thought of. And a lot of married people probably don't, which is, okay, write down the expectation of who does what in the marriage, right? And literally just make a list and then come back and compare that list, right? Like who's going to mow the lawn? Well, the husband, clearly, right? Who's going to cook dinner? Well, I thought it was going to be my wife. I cooked for the first 7 years of our marriage. 7 years, not a meal, right? But the expectation is there. So, frustration is expectations not meeting up with reality. Yeah. The only thing you can control is expectation. So I think the first point was that we tried to set up realistic expectations for each other so that we knew what success looked like. And as simple as, what are the household tasks, right? What are we homeschool too, our kids. So like my wife deals with the homeschooling. She deals with the household. She manages their schedules.
Yeah.
All the stuff that's really hard, frankly. Not like I'll take running $100 million fund any day when it comes in comparison to homeschooling. Like, you know, multiplying integers right now is just not in my purview, right? So,
Right. What in the heck is an integer? No,
right, exactly.
I gotta go look this up.
It's like, can you go do language arts with the kids? I'm like, no, you know, I can't string a sentence together with like the correct punctuation. That's why they give me a microphone, not a pen and paper. Anyway, you know, so that was a really great piece of advice, just trying to figure out like, okay, what do we expect? Who's doing what? And then is that reasonable?
Yeah.
And then maybe the best piece of advice he ever gave us in regards to marriage was treat your marriage like a garden, right? And come home and weed that garden daily. And if you do, beautiful things will grow. And if you ignore it, the weeds will choke it out. And, you know, it's a simple task. And we're not perfect at this by any means. But when we see things growing in our marriage that we don't like, right? And it usually comes out in like little quips or little like digs or jabs, right? No, we have literally never fought. We've never raised our voices at each other and yelled at each other. And it's not to say that I'm not passionate, right? It's just I don't want to treat my wife that way.
Mm-hmm.
So we just agreed, like, this is how we're going to argue, right? We're going to be respectful of each other, and we're going to talk these things out, and we're not going to let stuff fester. We're not going to let it breed into something that blows up later on in life. We're going to weed our garden daily. And that has been just a real big, good piece of advice. And then, you know, I don't know if it matters, but maybe it does to some of the listeners. Like, my wife and I met, and 9 months later we were engaged. 9 months later we were married. So it was fast, I guess, in terms of like how other people date. And I know people that have been dating for 5 years and still not engaged. And, you know, so to each their own, right? But like, I found my wife, I decided I was going to marry her, and that was it. And, you know, we're Christians. We are like Bible believing in terms of, we believe that marriage is not a piece of paper from the governmental side. It is a covenant between two people, right? And that means a lot in terms of like how you can break that apart. You know, marriage contract can be easily voided when it comes to governmental things, but we invited God into our marriage. We'd made the covenant before him and to each other that this was going to be forever. We took divorce off the table before we got married. We said, look, if we do this, this is not going to be an option. I don't care who does what. Right. We're broken human beings. We are going to fail each other. Right. But what can't fail is our marriage and our commitment to that covenant. And when you don't love your wife, love your marriage. Right. And ladies, when you don't love your husband, love your marriage. Love them, love your marriage enough to overcome the obstacles. Obstacles come. Like, that is absolutely going to happen. How you deal with those obstacles, right, is everything. And coming from, you know, seeing 7 divorces from just my parents, I recognize how easy it is to justify those means and to justify kind of the hurts and the wrongs that somebody does to you to run away.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's the easy thing to do. And if you don't have a covenant up front and you don't take divorce off the table, it's easier. That's why 60% of marriages end in divorce these days.
Yeah. Man, I love what you're saying. There's a couple things I wrote down. So I think the managing the expectations is huge. I know. So coming from the military, then starting my own business and building that team, like that is like, that's leadership 101. Like, know what you're doing, know what they're doing, and be completely clear about it. You know, I know you do, we do as well. We follow attraction. Like, that's one of the first things you do is you outline roles and responsibilities. And so that expectations are met right off the bat, or managed right off the bat. Cause you know, she's not mowing the lawn. And now that I know, she's not cooking as well, you know, like, so there's no, you know, like that's so important. And then the weed the garden piece. Oh, the other thing I was going to say too about managing expectations, I think, is your intent. Yeah, I mean, you went into it with an intent. Like, this is our intent. We are intending to get married. There's no other option. This is what we want. And when you're clear about what you want, it makes it absolutely easy to do, right? You go to the store, I'm going to go get a gallon of milk. There's no even question if you're committed or not, because you have so much faith in your ability to do it,
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, like, right off the bat, just have no faith in like, I don't believe in marriage, or I don't, you know what I mean? Like, if it gets bad, we'll just call it quits. Like, you're going to get that gallon of milk. It's so easy. You don't even second guess it. Like,
Yeah. I'll give this a shot, right? We'll
yeah,
see how it goes.
yeah.
Prenuptial agreements,
Mhm.
death, right? Death of a marriage before it even begins. You have an exit plan
Yeah.
just in case, right? There's no exit plan here, right? Like, we have contingency plans in place for when things like, if we get into an argument or something, it's like, okay, let's go to our respective corners,
Mhm.
right? Let's go cool off. Let's process this, and then let's come back together, right? You get 2 hours, whatever. So you have a contingency plan, but there's no exit plan. There's like pine box. That's how we leave this marriage. And that's what we decided early.
But I think, so some people might cringe at that, but at the same time, I think you also had the intention to have a happy marriage. And that probably came first and foremost. And that's why you did a lot of those exercises. We want to have a successful marriage. We don't want to just suffer through it. We want to be happy, have a good relationship. And that's where I think a lot of that comes from. But yeah, I absolutely agree with that, man. I think I think commitment these days is so undervalued. I remember going through selection, for one of the courses I did, and we started with something like 80 people, and people just quit like flies. They drop like flies. It's incredible. But I was one of the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, and they'd have to come talk to me before they quit. And all these guys had a story. They had a story before they even started. If this doesn't work out, I'll go be a cop. If this doesn't, I'm not sure if I just want to try this. I just want to give it a go. There was no commitment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's for everyone, and whatever, I get it. But like, when you pick something, commit to that. And I think that's exactly what you're saying here. And what do you want out of a relationship anyway? Get really clear about it. And I'm sure it's being happy first. No one wants to go in at half-assed. You don't want them to go in half-assed.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, defining success, right? It's a big piece of like, so what does a successful marriage look like? Right. And, it was just from the beginning of when I met my wife. Like, the guys would go out, they'd be like, hey, let's go out for some drinks, or let's go play some darts or whatever. I'd be like, cool. And then I'd show up with my wife, they'd be like, hey, it was a guy's night. I'm like, what is that? Like, why? I don't get it. Like, I like hanging out with this lady. I'm going to marry her.
Yeah.
Stands to reason that she can throw some darts too. Right. Like, and it was just, that's how it was with our relationship from the beginning.
Yeah.
And the other thing that, we were taught, so I wasn't raised in a Christian household, and I accepted Jesus, 17 years ago now. But that being said, the way that pre-marriage counseling goes from like that mentality, right, from that covenantal mindset, was also it brought God into the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for us, what we decided was that God was first, and that the spouses, each of us, were number two. Right. But because my wife is number two, she'll never be number three.
Mm-hmm.
And that was passed on from my father-in-law as well. Because like, if you're keeping God first, then the Bible has a lot to say about how to be a good husband and be a good wife.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're keeping that first, then your wife will always be second. But because she's second, she'll never be number third. She'll never drop down a rung, right? Because you are keeping the right things in the right order. And that to us has been a big deal too. And that didn't always happen, right? Let's talk about some failures and how we have had successful 15 years of marriage so far. The first year we got married, I was 24. She was 21. I was still partying quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. You're 24.
I have found, I was 24, and I was making some money, and making some money. I had a job and I lived by myself, and, so we were partying a lot. And it came to a head where she was like, look, this isn't what I signed up for, right? Like, you getting drunk at night and, waking up the next morning and kind of not knowing the conversations that we had. And she's like, this isn't what I envisioned in our successful marriage plan.
Yeah.
And she said, so I'm just letting you know, we took divorce off the table, but if this happens again, I'm going to be at my parents' house. And it was just a gut check, right? Of like, wow, okay, I'm allowing this, this other thing to sneak into my marriage that's not making my wife happy. Right. So like, how do you deal with that? And it was, I wasn't an alcoholic or anything, right? It was just, I was partying too much and didn't recognize that it was getting on her nerves. So I pulled it way back. Right.
Mhm.
And the next year was focusing on why I was doing that. Because there's always a reason, right? You always have these, you're masking something.
Mhm.
And I found that historically, I just turned 40 this year, but historically, the times that my life is not going the way that I want, it's usually predicated on something else that's underlying that I haven't dealt with yet. And similar to how that works in your marriage, you have to do that work on yourself to figure out like, okay, what is the cause? What is the root of this? This is a symptom, but that's not the root. Right. And same things, those things pop up in your marriage too, where it's like, hey, we're being more sarcastic than we typically like to be, right? And everybody has their own gauge of that, right? So it's not to say don't be sarcastic. Although in the Greek, it does mean cutting of the flesh. So just sarcasm, sarkos comes from cutting. But you know, if that's something that's eking out, right? Like, oh, we're being more sarcastic towards, that's a symptom. But what is the root, right? And there typically is something else that you have to root out, and you have to be, you know, brave in your marriage and brave with yourself to go and root those things out and shine a spotlight on the things that you don't want to shine a spotlight on. And, but that's how things get fixed, right? When things get brought to light, that's how they get fixed. So,
how do you, how did you and your wife, either or, address those? How did you bring it up? You know, because sometimes those can be sensitive, you know. Obviously she kind of dropped the shoe when you, or, you know, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but, you know, I'm leaving if you don't change your behavior kind of thing. I mean, obviously that's a wake up call, but then how do you do it on a subtle level, like on some of the more subtle things? You know?
So that was the big mountain, right? That was the big, like, hey, this is a non-starter for me. But things come up all the time, right? That, like, you know, she just mentioned to me in the last couple of weeks, like, I'm not rested. I don't feel rested. I feel tired all the time, and I am sleeping more than I typically am, right? And like, we're not medically minded, so like, we don't go to any of those like, well, what does that mean thing? I go to exactly what I know, which is clarity has an inverse relationship to stress. And the reason that I think she's tired right now is because I'm not assisting with creating the level of clarity around the house and in our schedules. And I absolutely know this to be true. Since January, we've been launching this fund, and I have been buried mentally in figuring it out, right? Because we have to create the vision for it. So I'm usually a very hands-on husband and father, right? Like, where I'm just involved in a lot of things because I like that. And I can tell that in the last couple of months, I haven't been, right? So now she's tired and stressed. Why? And it's because I've dropped off and she's had to cover, right? So like, when she has to cover, but there's no succinct understanding of when she has to cover, right? It stresses her brain out. So, and that's all she said. She just gently said, like, you know, I feel lethargic. I feel like tired. And I'm like, okay, so that's a symptom. Like, let's talk about that. Like, why do you think that is? Right. And then it got all the way to, you know, who's not putting their shoes away? Right. The shoes in the hallway are stressing the wife out. Right. So like, oh, okay. I know, I know that since the beginning of our marriage, I would walk in and you can find me by the trail of clothes that I would leave. Like a sock here, sock there, right? Pants here. And like, I would just, and because that doesn't bother me, right? But it bothers her. So I've had to change behavior over time to accommodate for that. And, you know, my father-in-law told me a story about a couple that came in for counseling, and they were like on the verge of divorce. And what it came down to was the guy wasn't putting stuff in the hamper. He wouldn't walk down the hallway from the shower to the laundry room and put it in the hamper. You know what fixed their marriage? Moving the hamper into the bedroom.
Oh my gosh.
But they wouldn't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
It just didn't come up. So let's talk about practical stuff. I know we like to talk about practicality here. So like, what do you do to create that clarity and stress? How do you bring up these difficult topics? It's weeding the garden, right? It doesn't become a difficult topic until it's too late, right? You know, when it's an easy topic to talk about is just when it starts to spout up.
Yeah.
So, so we do like weekly board meetings, right? We do family board meetings.
Ah, cool.
And what that looks like is very simply, we put the kids to bed, sit down, and we'll say, okay, let's talk about how the week went. Like, let's do a 1 week look back. Where were the stressors? Where could it have been better? Right? It's the debrief, right? You come back from a mission, you debrief what went right, what went wrong, what do we do different next time? Same thing. What went right this week? This is what went right. What went wrong? What should we have done different? Okay. Now let's talk about next week. Okay. So we've kind of talked about the last week, and now we know kind of where we could have stepped in and helped each other. You cover and move a little bit better on certain things. And this is where we dropped the ball, and we didn't communicate well on that.
Yeah.
You had a meeting that wasn't on the calendar, so it blew my whole day apart. It happens all the time, right? And it's just that intentionality of like, okay, let's fix what happened this week, and like, let's grow together and get better for next week. Next week, we go through the calendar. Everybody agree what's on the calendar? Yeah, perfect. Let's talk about the 3 non-negotiables for next week, right? We have 1 marriage non-negotiable that we're going to work on in the marriage. Maybe that's a date night. Maybe that's a game night. Maybe that's just sitting and talking over a glass of wine without the kids, whatever. So 1 thing for the marriage, 1 thing for the kids, 1 thing for the house, right? You always have honey-do lists. Things always have to get done around the house. But you know what's overwhelming? You know what creates stress? All the projects, right? I go through, I look at everything that has to get done. I'm overwhelmed, and what happens? Nothing gets done.
Right.
Right. So we just very practically say, what's the 1 thing that's going to get done, non-negotiable this week? I'm going to clean out the garage. I'm going to take all these boxes from Amazon that have been piling up in the garage. I'm going to take them to the dump. Right. I'm going to paint this room. Right. 1 room, 1 week. Fine. We know it's tangible and we can get it done. Right.
Man, I like that.
And then what do we do for the kids? What are we doing? You know, right now we're in South Carolina near Hilton Head. We're going on daily bike rides. It's 78 degrees every day. After dinner, we go on family bike rides. It's amazing. We don't bring any tech, right? No phones allowed. Like, we just go and we talk and we stop and we hang out and just spending some kid time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the practical piece of like, how are we doing that? And during that 1 week look back, that's the stuff that helps weed the garden, right? That's the time that you agree upon to bring up the things that are difficult to talk about, right? You have L10 meetings. The whole premise of an L10 while running EOS is complete accountability and transparency. And if you don't do that, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
How much more so in your marriage, right? If you can't be honest with the person that loves you the most on the planet about what's annoying you or what you think you could have done better, right? And little trick, guys and gals, if you're listening to this, start with where you blew it. Instead of saying, here's where you blew it, honey, start with where you blew it. You know you blew it last week at some point, right? Start the meeting with that. Hey, here's where I know I dropped the ball, right? What do you think about that? And let them tell you how you think you can fix it, right? Come in accountable, like come in wanting to learn and grow from that experience and be open and honest and transparent about it. Because if you do that, you're only getting your marriage stronger and better.
Yeah, those are some really good points, man. I think, and obviously it starts with the desire, right? You have to have that desire to make your marriage stronger, to make your relationship stronger. But all those points are awesome. I think that's really good. I like that. Start with what you dropped the ball, because then you come from a place of honesty and understanding.
Humility, right?
Yeah, humility. Yeah. And
I mean,
there's no attack on egos when you go like that, obviously, and nobody puts walls up when you start with yourself. I think Eminem says that he used to make fun of himself first in rap battles. That way, the other guy couldn't make fun of him. That's a different strategy. But still, I think it's that's.
But it's communication, right? It is a tactic, and I think overwhelmingly we believe that being tactical in our conversations with our spouses is wrong, but it's not. Tactics are there for guardrails. You can be tactical. I mean, Never Split the Difference is probably one of my favorite books, if not my favorite communication book.
Great book.
And it's technically a sales book, right? But it's really a life book. It's really how do you communicate with a counterpart, whether it's a terrorist or whether it's your spouse. How do you communicate effectively with that person, right? Effective communication takes time. It takes work. You're not a natural communicator, right? To all of you listening, you're not. You're terrible at it. You need to learn how to be better at communicating. And that takes effort, right? But the payoff is amazing, right? Because there's not walls, there's not barriers. You're actually communicating to hear and to understand rather than to respond, right? I'm sure that people have heard that before, but that's a really big piece of how to communicate effectively, especially within your own household.
I like that. Yeah. I think a lot of times I looked at that book as more as a manipulative, like being able to manipulate my counterpart, but it is, if the other person feels understood, there's going to be better communication. But they're not going to bottle it up and they're not going to, or attack you or whatever. So that's powerful stuff, man. And you said one other thing too that I think is very key, because we, like in the military, we mapped out every detail of what success looks like. In your business, you do it too. What does success look like? We want to hit these 3 goals in 90 days. We want to hit this in a year, but if you don't do that in your marriage, nobody knows where they're going. We're just living together at that point. Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is the goal?
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, I want a partner. I want a life mate. I don't want a roommate.
Right.
Like, I can do that and pay less in my mortgage, frankly. Right.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm looking for.
Right. Yeah. But that is so key, being absolutely clear of what it looks like to have that successful marriage, that successful outcome with your partner. That's powerful, man. Where did you, and obviously, I mean, you probably learned this from a lot of people. You mentioned your father-in-law, who was a pastor. He probably has done a bunch of counseling himself, I imagine. And then, do you guys do anything else together? I mean, do you intentionally go to do, I remember you mentioned a couples retreat or something at one point.
Yeah. So,
and I'm not trying to advertise
nights.
Anything. I'm
So date nights, right? I mean, let's start like pretty simple. I think a lot of people think that date nights have to be like going out to a fancy dinner. It doesn't. You can go for a walk on the beach, and do picnics, right? There's all kinds of fun things. You go for a hike, but put it on your calendar, right? Yeah. We're going to do date nights. Cool. When?
Yeah.
Right. What are you going to do during that date night? Like, I don't allow that stuff to go in my business, but we allow it to go in our family lives all the time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Where it's like you don't have a date night calendared. Well, how are you going to get a babysitter? Right. Like all the things, right? The logistical issues that come up with doing it. But guess what? If I know every Thursday's date night, I have a standing babysitter on Thursday night.
That's a good idea.
Thursday's date night. Right. And it's just mapped out and it's blocked off in my calendar. Date night, 5 hours, whatever. Right. So be intentional about those things too, right? Very practically. And then, we do marriage conferences. People are like, well, why do you guys have a great marriage? Why do you do marriage counseling? Well, it's like saying, hey, you're jacked. Why do you go to the gym?
Yeah, that's a good point. Right? It's a muscle.
It's not something that we arrive at. You gotta exercise, right? It's a process. It's a continual learning curve. And we don't want to just get to a place where it's like, okay, cool. Our marriage is fun. We're going to stop now. Like, no, we want
that sounds funny, but that's exactly what happens, right? The honeymoon stage is over and now we're going to stop or taper off,
It's like, still date your wife, still, do romantic gestures, still, and model it for your kids. I mean, for God's sake, your kids are watching what a marriage is supposed to be right in front of them, and they will learn from that, or they'll model it in the wrong way, right? I mean, if you study sociology, you can see that second generation kids of divorce are overwhelmingly divorced. They have higher rates of divorce. And then if you look at the difference between a first divorce and a second divorce, the numbers are staggering. They go from like 54%, I think, is the number for first marriages failing. It goes to 72% with a second marriage and up to 80% with a third marriage. And I think they stopped tracking after that, which is reasonable to stop tracking after 3 marriages. But that's the stats, right? And why? Because it's also a muscle. It's learned behavior. It's okay. No, I didn't lose all of my friends when I got my first divorce, so I can make it through another one, right? So we go to marriage conferences and we talk about, hey, how are we getting better all over the place? How are we serving each other better? How are we putting things in the calendar so that we're spending more of our time together? One of the things that my mom always said was, I put my kids first, right? And I feel like that's a pretty common theme where people say the kids come first, the kids come first.
Yeah.
My kids do not come first. They are well aware of it. I mean, I flat out tell them, and it's not because I don't love them. It's because I want them to understand what the pyramid looks like.
Yeah.
God's first, your mom's second, you're third. Because you're third, you'll never be fourth. But because you're third, mom's always going to be number two. I always go to her about decisions about you, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to trump your mother, right? Because you start to allow that stuff to eke in and it starts to drive a wedge, right? And then the result is catastrophic.
Well, you are the foundation of the family too, right? You and your wife are the foundation of the family. And so if there is a wedge between you, the foundation's cracked. I don't care how well you treat your kids. If you guys aren't treating each other well, like that's not going to be enjoyable. And I've lived through, a divorce and 2 divorces, and not in my personal marriage, but with my parents too. So I totally get that. You see it as a kid, it. I remember they put me on the stand. They're like, who do you want to live with? I was like, I want them both to be back together, because I didn't know what to say. I was like 8 years old,
Yeah.
Yeah. But kids don't know how to process that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the statistics on divorce and kids of divorce they're overwhelming. In terms of like alcohol abuse, in terms of SAT scores, in terms of who becomes a successful business person. Just Google like those type of statistics, and I think you will find yourself also overwhelmed by them, because it's such not an easy fix, right? And I don't want to villainize people that get divorced. I understand that divorce is a thing and there's reasons, right? And there's excuses for everything. But if you take it off the table early and you just say that there's no way out, right? We're going to make it through this regardless. I think it makes you stronger, right? I think it makes you really have to put your head down and think through how to problem solve within the marriage much more realistically.
Yeah.
I
would even say, when you approach it like that, I'm going to win. I want a successful marriage. You don't jump into it haphazardly either. So, for example, I use the metaphor of skydiving a lot of times too. Like, you don't go into skydiving like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just land without my parachute. Like, no,
right.
No, that's not how it works. Like, you either go to skydive and you're going to be successful, or you don't go skydive, So like, I think the same thing is true. Like, be clear about what you want to get out of that marriage. Like, you're not getting married. Unfortunately, in the military, you see a lot of guys get married because they know all of a sudden they can live off base if they get married. But, and so a lot of divorces happen like that, which is pretty unfortunate, but yeah. But like, what do you want to get out of it? Yeah.
So, and these marriage conferences help you go through that, right? They're just, what is a marriage conference? Like, why do you go to these things? It's literally, you sit in a room with a bunch of other people that are trying to work on their marriage too. And you usually have a dinner associated with it. And there's usually a guest speaker talking about some practical, tactical things to do in the marriage to help foster communication. That's really all these things are, is trying to foster better communication with your spouse. And what comes out of that is beautiful, right? Because it's honest. And when you're honest with each other, those things have room to grow and breathe, right? So let me just read a couple of the takeaways. I just was looking at some of my notes from this. So it was a Christian marriage conference. So they involve God a lot in the conversation. And, one of my favorite lines from it was, unity is the love language of the Holy Spirit. And I think it's so easy to create division, right? And that's kind of what, that's like the flip side of what you want in a marriage, right? You want unity, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why a wedding band is a circle, like all these different symbols of marriage are about unity. And I think it's just a great way to put that. Like, unity is the love language of the Holy Spirit, because that's what is desired for our marriage. And when you allow division and things like that to creep in, that's when you start to rattle that foundation a little bit. Be intentional about your spouse and their interests, right? Date nights are time to be attentive and invest in each other. So what we started doing, right, is not bringing our phones.
Yeah.
Steve, how do you do that? Well, pretend it's 1987 and you give the babysitter the name and number of the restaurant that you're going to be at.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
and they can call the hostess and say, hey, there's an emergency. Because that's the excuse now, right? Is, well, what if there's an emergency? Well, hey, before 1998, we had to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't have a cell phone until I was maybe a junior in college, right? In like 2003. Before, it was a beeper. I had the turquoise pager, right, tucked in my front pocket. And then before that, it was payphones, and you had to call the restaurant where your parents were going to be at. And if they weren't there, they were on their way home or on their way there. So put the phone down, right? Those times are, and be intentional about this, guys. Like, if you go to a Buffalo Wild Wings, well, first of all, don't take your lady to Buffalo Wild Wings.
I was just going to say that.
be better.
Yeah, be better.
But let's say you
better,
do.
fellas.
Make sure you take the chair that doesn't face the TVs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Small little practical step, but don't allow distractions to seep into your date night. Your date night is for you and your spouse to connect. Don't allow yourself to get distracted by the TV that's on the wall, right? Better yet, go to fine dining restaurants that don't have TVs on the wall, and don't bring your phone in. And look, if you're afraid of that, just leave your phone in the glove box of your car, right? Something like that. So that was just easy type stuff, right? Be slow to speak and quick to listen. Yeah.
Everybody, yeah. Like, people know that. People know that, but we get offended. Our ego wants to, I'm right, you're wrong. Yeah.
Let me respond.
Yeah.
Just listen. And so the intentionality about their interests too, right? Like, I learned this from another couple. This guy's a Star Wars fanatic, right? I'm not. I don't even know if I've seen all of them, frankly. But his wife was not, and he has like figurines, right? So he's like a big Star Wars guy.
Okay.
And she started asking him questions because she knew he was interested. She didn't care. She spent the time understanding what his interests were, right? And going to those movies. And that's self-sacrifice, right? And that helps in creating humility, which helps create unity in that marriage. So be intentionally interested about what my wife loves to paint. I can't draw a circle, right? One of our date nights, we're going to one of these, sipping wine paint party things. Yeah. Right. I'll probably draw a llama. I don't know, but I don't want to, I would never say like, hey, Ashton, let's go draw some sunsets. Like, let's go hang out and do this. Right. But my wife wants to do it and it makes her feel good. So I'm going to go do it with her. Right. So just be intentional about the interests. Right. And you could even trade off and say, hey, I'm going to be intentional this week about your interest. Next week, we're going to go do my thing. Right. We're going to go shoot some guns. Mm-hmm. You're going to go do this. And that's where it's easy. It's practical, but put it on the calendar and just go do it. Feelings buried alive never die.
Yeah.
When you get offended, tell your spouse, hey, that didn't make me feel so good. Like that made me feel offended.
Yeah.
Right.
Comes up later.
It's just communication, right? Because especially if you bury it, right, and then it blows up. So one thing that the guy said, who was the speaker at this marriage conference, was fantastic because he said, big things usually show up in the small stuff, right? And small stuff usually shows up in the big things. So like if you find yourself stubbing your toe and losing your ish, you probably have some underlying things you got to deal with, right?
Yeah.
If you find yourself blowing up on your husband or your wife because they didn't take the trash out or didn't vacuum the floor or whatever, right? That's a little thing. If you're blowing up on your spouse because of it, there's something else, right? That needs to get rooted out. So feelings buried alive never die. I love that. So you don't allow it to continue to fester, right? And then choose each other every single day. Choose each other when you don't feel like it.
I think that's even the most important one.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
Choose each other every day.
Yeah.
You know, choose your marriage every day. You know, it's so nice. And, you know, we're married 15 years now. So, it happens less and less that we're like apart, but like we go to conferences and stuff. And like, it's so, natural for any conversation with any woman or just a bunch of guys that are hanging out. Like it constantly goes back to my wife and kids. Like it's just such a huge part of my life that like, I'm never concerned that either one of us are going to slip up and cheat on each other. Right. Like we're just constantly on each other's mind because we choose to do that every single day.
Yeah. Well, it's never an accident either. Like you don't slip up.
Right. Yeah. Interesting
You're
choice
not
of words.
gonna believe what happened. I was going to the grocery store. I tripped on the curb. Bada bing, bada boom. Yeah,
look at this.
No. Yeah. But
like, you know, that's part of like these emotional affairs that start to take place, right? Is like you find yourself talking to somebody else more intimately than you would talk to your spouse. Why? Right?
Yeah.
It's because you probably don't have a plan in place to make sure that you're having those communications. So anyway, I think those are some really practical steps that you can take. I know we're probably winding down here, but I'd love to touch on real quick the family board meeting with the kids.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read the family board meeting, it's by Jim Shields. It's a fantastic book. Go pick it up. He's a buddy of mine. He's been on my podcast talking about this. It's the most simple yet effective thing I think we've ever implemented in our family with our kids.
Oh, wow.
And it is just amazing. It's been so fun and it's so simple. So this is what it is. Every quarter, every 90 days, you have a board meeting one-on-one with your kids, one of your kids, right? No siblings allowed.
Both parents?
One parent, one child.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
Right. So we have 3 kids. So we have to do this 6 times in a 90-day period of time because she does it 3 times and I do it 3 times.
Yeah.
Sean, who you know, has 6 kids. So I'm you know, they're in for it, right? They have 12 weeks to do 12 dates.
Wow.
But it's an activity that you allow your child to choose. It gives you a lot of insight as to what their interests are, right? And as they continue to grow, as their interests change, you get to see that without having to ask them. So they're choosing what the activity is. It's 4 hours, no tech allowed, right? No phones. Again, you're doing a tech fast with your kids. I told my kids this, by the way. She freaked out. My 8-year-old like jumped up and down and screeched. I don't think I'm that bad on the phone. Like I leave my phone in my office a lot when I go out for lunch and dinner. Like I'm trying to be intentional about not being looking down all the time and trying to be present as a dad. But she like screeched when she found this out. So 4 hours, 4-hour date. They choose the place. You don't bring a phone and you go do something fun first. And then you go either for a walk or for dinner or whatever. And you just have this very specific date with each one of your kids. The conversations that start to come out of these things, right? Because they're comfortable. You're being the fun dad, right? So you're doing some fun stuff and then it's breaking down that barrier of like communication. And then you're having a good conversation with them. So that's it. We put it on the calendar. Every other Saturday, we have 4 hours blocked off. It's going to be family board meeting time. And we let them choose and we put it on the calendar. Like, what's today? Wednesday. My next family board meeting is with my 8-year-old. It's on Friday. We're doing a adventure ropes course on Hilton Head Island. It's going to take 3 hours to go do that. And then we're going to go out for some ice cream or for lunch or whatever. Right. And okay, so it's like, yeah, but why don't you just do these family events? Well, we still do family time, right? We still do maybe 1 kid and 2 parents, but you are building the relationship with them, right? You are having those conversations with them and they might feel more open talking to you than, you know, your spouse about some topic or another. So this is just, you know, Jim Shields, who wrote the book, he said, look, this is a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Like, this is super easy, right? But I'll tell you, man, it has been so impactful because now my kids look forward to them, right? Yeah. And then we debrief on the way home too, right? We're driving back. I'm like, hey, what was your favorite part of the day? It's like, hey, you know, I really enjoyed doing this. It's like, hey, I was scared about doing this, but then I like overcame it. And then like the questions that'll make you cry start popping out. Like, have you ever been afraid? Have I ever been? I'm afraid right now having this conversation. What do you mean? Have I ever been afraid? Like, yeah, I've been afraid all the time, but they don't know that, right? These kids look up to us and they think that we're Superman. They think that we're invincible, but like they start to have real conversations that really give them the place to run when things get hard, right? And that's the whole point, is you're building this relationship when things are good, when you're having a good time, when it's hard, they come to you because they were able to come to you when it was easy. Again, we do this stuff in our businesses, but we don't often put it in our calendar to make sure that it makes it into our family lives.
Yeah.
So,
and then we wonder why, our kid is depressed or, doesn't know how to communicate with us or, because that's where you hear all these issues like, oh, I can't get him off tech. He never wants to talk to me about this. I didn't even know he was doing that at school or whatever. Like, what does success look like? And you're fostering that value with them. You're showing them you value that time and then they value it.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I mean, you have more kids than I do. I only have 2, but my oldest is 8 and youngest is 4. And I think it's a brilliant idea. We call them daddy-daughter days. But I think being more intentional, I would like to start incorporating more of these. That's really cool.
Yeah. And it's not to say you don't do those, right? Those family times or those like group trips and all that stuff, but that intentional time, it gives them that safe space to talk kind of unfettered, not around their siblings, not, it's such a simple, practical thing to do. And it's effective.
Yeah. And then they're not turning to those other things that everybody's always so worried about. If you have girls, you're worried about as they get older and dating and that kind of stuff, that stuff worries me, so I want to have that open relationship. But if she doesn't feel like we have that, she's going to be seeking that somewhere else, with somebody else probably.
Yeah. We model it, right?
Yeah.
Like daughters seek out their dads in some form or fashion, right? In some character traits. So give them the character traits that you want, that you want them to go after, right? Like expose that stuff, that to themselves and be vulnerable about it, right? And that's the hardest thing, I think, is the vulnerability in your marriage and with your kids is what creates authenticity and creates that closeness in relationship. And as men, especially the entrepreneurial men, like I think that we try to, you joked about it earlier. I have 2 feelings, good. And I don't know what that other stuff is. Like, we don't want to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's so important because that vulnerability allows that closeness to come in. And like, I'm a firm believer that there's no neutral, right? You're growing or dying, right? You're moving forward, you're moving backward. And same thing in your marriage, same thing with your kids. You're either getting closer or further apart. And what are you doing today to make it intentional to be growing closer?
Yeah. I love it, man. I think that's huge. The intentional part. You brought up a lot of great points, and I think we're coming up on almost an hour here. So I kind of want to wrap this up, but this stuff is really good. I think in the military and in as an entrepreneur, we get so focused about winning at that aspect that a lot of the stuff at home you think it's on auto drive and you just let it go. At least that's how I felt, like I would leave on a deployment and I would just expect everything to be normal the same way when I come back, but I hadn't been given, but I hadn't given the attention, but I had, I wasn't there physically and emotionally, So that's, I think it's the entrepreneurial lie, right? If you ask 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs, why do you do what you do? It's for my family. Yeah.
Okay. Prove it.
Yeah. Be there for your family.
Right? Like you bury yourself in your business and your family's falling apart. Like that's the entrepreneurial lie, but that's what we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And it's easy to do because you want to sound selfless, but as entrepreneurs, you're selfish. You have to be, because often you're on an island when you start. So you have to be at least a certain percentage of selfish to get a business off the ground, but don't allow it to continue to be the lie, right? Don't allow it to steal the 18 summers that you have with your kids. Don't allow it to steal the joy in your marriage, right? It's an easy thing to miss. Yeah. So I'm glad we chatted about it today. I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think this is great. And okay, I just want to finish with 4 quick questions and then we'll wrap this up. But all right. So big question for me. I like to explore what people really want out of life. So if money wasn't an issue, you had all the money you needed, what would you do?
Interesting.
Would you
So
stay in South
first-
Carolina?
So first, money is not an issue.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
a perceived issue.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
So I mean, I believe that all of our needs will be met. But I think I love to travel. I mean, I really enjoy seeing other cultures and meeting other people and having deep conversations, right? Like I go deep fast.
All right. First place you go.
First place I would go. I've always wanted to go to Fiji,
Ooh, yeah.
but like where I get to hang out with like Fijians, right? Like I want to go hang out with the people. I don't want to be in a resort. Like I want to go hang out with some people that are like whittling canoes and spearfishing. I think that'd be fun.
They don't swim. I've been there.
They don't swim?
There's only 2 of them. They were proud of this. There was only 2 Fijians that actually get in the water. That's what they kept telling me. I don't know if that's true.
It's shocking to me.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, to live on an island and not get in the water, I think is shocking.
But yeah, it is a beautiful place. You know, there were cannibals all the way back up into the 60s, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they're very big people, and they will tell you, they're like, we were. I started negotiating on a price, and this guy's he's like a foot taller than me, and he's like, we were cannibals, and you know what we call white people? Sweet meat.
Oh my God.
Like
I might have to rethink this.
they're very nice. They're very nice now, but it was just it's intimidating. You know, I'm not a small guy. These guys are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It is funny. Anyway, all right. Sorry. Move on.
So honestly, I would still be doing what I do. I love what I do. I like helping other people create generational wealth. And our fund, our donor advised fund, which is a big piece of the business, is we give a ton of money away. So our big, hairy, audacious goal is to give 80% of our profit away by the time we get to a certain place. So all of our team knows that we're going to be giving away 80% through our donor advised fund that flows through to nonprofits. So for me, I think I'm kind of twofold. I think I'm a philosopher at heart, and I think I'm a philanthropist, right? So like I enjoy seeing what money can do when it's put in good hands. So I think we'd probably be doing the same thing work-wise.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. All right. And what has been the biggest catalyst for growth for you? What has been the biggest like turning point, moment, book, teacher, mentor? Like what has really helped you grow in life?
Yeah. So in college, I was like a universalist, meaning I believed in like maybe a higher power, didn't want to get it named. And I was like very agnostic, I guess, but universalist in so far that I believed in like energies and putting stuff out into the universe and having it come back and things like that. And I've read the Tao Te Ching, I've read the Quran, I've read the Torah, I've read, and it wasn't until I read the New Testament and started looking at the historical Jesus that I decided to give my life to Christ and follow the teachings of the Bible, which by no means brings a lot of joy. Right? A bottle of bourbon will give you a lot of joy. Living biblically is difficult and is required of God's grace. But once I started to recognize that God has been in my life for a lot longer than I recognized him, that was really a big catalyst for change for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's powerful. All right. And then what do you do for health? What kind of KPIs do you incorporate into your plan for health? Obviously I see you have a lot for your business, your marriage. What about your physical health?
Yeah. So I just took a lot of heat on this for Facebook because I said I've bought $200 million worth of real estate and I've never gotten into an ice bath and I've never done 75 hard.
That's yeah.
And I think a lot of people were offended by that, but it wasn't meant to be offensive. It was just to say like that's somebody else's like thing, right? Like I've never done that. But I do, I go to the gym about 3 times a week just to lift. And then I make sure that I'm walking or riding a bike for 30 minutes every day just to get outside and be in nature and like get the heart rate up and, just try to stay moving.
Yeah.
Right now I'm doing a 3-month restrictive protocol where it's like 30 foods that you can eat.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, what can't you have? It's like easier to tell you what I can have. And that's a Candida protocol, because there's like Candida overgrowth in most of our bodies. And to kill that, you really need like a 3-month structured program to not feed it. So that's what my wife and I are in the process of doing right now.
It's interesting. We should talk about that. I like that stuff. Okay. And then lastly, what brings you the most joy?
It's a good question, because you didn't say what makes me happiest, which is the crux of happiness is emotion. The crux of joy is like where it comes from, right? Where it stems from. So I think my relationship with God honestly brings me the most joy. And it's one of my favorite quotes by C.S. Lewis. It says, I don't believe in all of these things, or I don't believe in Christianity because of all of these things. I believe in all of the other things because of Christianity. It's like when the sun rises in the morning, it's because of the sun that I can see everything else. And I think if my marriage is healthy, I think my kids' relationship is healthy, I think my business is healthy because of that relationship first. And so I think the stem of all of that joy stems from that relationship.
Okay. Yeah, it's powerful, man. All right. Last question. How can people get in touch with you? I mean,
Cool.
you've dropped a lot of wisdom today. You also have a podcast I think you should put out there. Yeah,
we do. We talk about some of this stuff. I mean, I think, relationship investing is like my new, my new like passion project. Right. And that's why I was so grateful for you to have us come on and talk about it, because I don't think it's talked about enough. But yeah, so my podcast is Free from Wall Street. Right. We're anti-Wall Street over here. So Free from Wall Street is the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
And you can go to integrityhg.com and check out our investor club and see all the nonprofits that we're supporting. We've supported 16 nonprofits monthly or annually since the inception of the Donor Advised Fund. And it's been incredible to see some of the things that the Donor Advised Fund is doing. We actually just purchased a couple of vans for some pastors in Ukraine that are running widows and orphans out of Kiev. And one of my buddies just got a shipment of bulletproof vests and bulletproof blankets to those guys getting extracted from Kiev during this war. So some really cool things that they're doing on the front lines. So you can check out some of the nonprofits there too, and sign up for the Investor Club if you want to hear about some of our deal flow. Not as exciting about this stuff, but creating generational wealth for you and your family so that you guys can go spend more time together, more passive income, things like that. Same things that you guys are doing. So yeah, and we're on social media too. Don't hit me up on Facebook. I probably won't answer, but reach out to us on our website. You can get
manage expectations. Yeah,
that's right. Try it.
That's great. Hey, thanks, Steve. This has been really good. I think people will get a lot of benefit out of this. This isn't talked about very often. So I think this is great, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. We will see you on the next one. Take care. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into today's podcast. We hope you found the information and insights shared valuable and thought-provoking. And if you liked this show, please subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And until next time, stay winning, stay curious, and crush life.